Welcome to the Deep Light podcast from Park City's Presbyterian Church. This is a space for community, healing, hope, and education around topics of rescue and growth. Our prayer for this series is that it illuminates a deeper understanding of struggles within and around us, as well as God's profound love and redemptive light in Jesus Christ.
Hi everyone, I want to welcome you to another episode of Deep Light. My name is Mark Davis. I serve as one of the pastors at Park City's Presbyterian Church, and we are delighted today to have Rebecca Spurgeon. It's a great last name. She's going to tell you about it in just a minute, who is going to talk with us a bit about her own journey. Today we're going to be talking about just the reality of what it means to live in a world that God's created that's been so profoundly impacted by sin, by the fall, and how that impacts each of us in the ways in which we try to navigate life. I promise you're going to hear really powerful things as you listen or watch this video. As always, if there's something you want to talk about, don't hesitate to reach out to us at deeplight@pcpc.org. You can send us an email and we will get back to you as quick as possible to come alongside in any way we can. If you prefer, you could call us at the church, 214-224-2500. Again, thanks for giving us your time, and I hope you'll be blessed by what you see and are here today. We are grateful that we can offer this in the name of Christ. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for giving us just a bit of your time today to talk. I got to know you just a little bit when my daughter was at the University of Arkansas with you. How far apart were you guys in terms of class?
I think 2 grades apart.
Two grades apart.
Honestly, it all kind of blended together. All my friends were different grades. I think it was 2.
Yeah, and you stayed there, right? So
Yes.
You've been there in Fayetteville a little longer, which is a beautiful place.
Yes.
Our son's up there right now, and we love going to visit.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk first about the stage of life you're in right now. So your name was Rebecca Hatton.
Yes.
Your dad, Pete, has just recently come on our staff as one of our pastors, pastor of family, which we're very excited about. And you know, your mom, Kristina, being here, and as a counselor, we're so excited to have them here, but also getting to know you and your 2 brothers in the years to come as well. So you were Rebecca Hatton, now you are Rebecca Spurgeon.
Yes.
Tell us that story.
I got married in June of 2021, so about a year and a half ago, and my husband and his family, his dad's side of the family, are from India. And in India, when you become a believer, oftentimes you'll change your last name to that of the theologian that changed your life and, you know, like led to your becoming a believer. And so Charles Spurgeon was that for my husband's family. And so his grandfather changed his last name to his first name and his last name to Spurgeon. And so now we are the Spurgeons.
I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
And if somebody watching or listening doesn't know who Spurgeon is, Charles Spurgeon was a fantastic, very well-known, powerful preacher. And a lot of people continue to read his sermons, but maybe he's most well-known for his morning and evening devotional, which is very, very powerful. Now, growing up, were you somebody that read Spurgeon, or were you familiar with Spurgeon, or not so much?
I was. I didn't read anything of his, but we definitely, I feel like he was a household name, him and Tim Keller, that. Yeah. Just, those names were talked about in our house a lot. And so then when I got married, and my middle name is now Hatton, which sounds very similar to his middle name, it's a very, very reformed name.
It is. I love that.
So, yeah.
Well, so happy for you guys, being married a year and a half, and just exciting. It's a new chapter of your life. Yeah. So let's go back. Tell us your story, wherever you want to start. When did you come to saving faith? And a bit of your journey along the way. What were some of the highs, some of the lows? And just love to get to know you and our guest as well.
Yeah. Well, I grew up as a believer in a believing home, pastor dad, and so was in church every Sunday and Sunday school and Wednesday night and leading worship with FCA in high school, and just always involved in the church. And
how old were you when you all moved to Edmond?
I was in 5th grade, so probably 10-ish.
Okay, so just before middle school, then you guys moved from Texas up to Oklahoma, to Edmond, Oklahoma. Okay.
Yeah. And so that transition was definitely difficult. I was at a private Christian school in Waco and had 27 people in my class, to then starting middle school at a big public school in a new state where I don't know anyone. It was really hard. And Edmond did eventually become home and somewhere where I love, but it took a minute. And I think that transition, it made things harder for me. And I think middle school is hard for anyone. And I think insecurities really pick up around then. And so being the new girl didn't help with what all the insecurities you already have as a middle schooler. So
it's one thing though to deal with those insecurities in a school where there's 27 kids in the class.
Right, and that you've been with since pre-K, so
Right.
they've been like your besties for your whole life.
Right,
so.
versus now you're entering into the middle school with not just 27 in a class, but more than 27 in a classroom. I can only imagine. And at what point were you entering the school? Was this like the beginning of the fall, or was it mid-year when you were starting school?
We moved on January 1st, so I started
Mid-year. Wow.
Had Christmas break, half in Waco, and the rest in Oklahoma, and
Wow,
then
that's hard.
started school. And I am grateful that I started in 5th grade and not like with the start of 6th grade. So my parents were very that was what they wanted because they didn't want me to start middle school and be totally
And your
new,
dad,
so.
you guys were called up there to plant a church. So you had more of an established church where you were.
Yes.
Now you're coming into something that's going to look a lot different,
Yeah.
right? Okay, that's
Yeah.
good for the context of everything else.
Yes, we had moved from Waco where my uncle was the pastor of the church and my cousins were, we did everything together. And so moving from family that was also best friends to a small church that we met in many, many random different locations.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Yeah. So tell me about, the insecurities that you were experiencing. I imagine they're all pretty normal to what a 5th grade, 6th grade girl would go through. So what were some of those that stand out to you though? You're like, I really thought about this a lot, or this was really substantial in my life.
well, I feel like I kind of shot up faster than everyone, and my height has stayed the same since middle school, but at the time I just felt like I was bigger than everyone. And I just remember feeling very insecure about that, and it breaks my heart to look back now on pictures of middle school me who thought I was just gigantic, even though I literally was not. I was just a little middle schooler that was growing, but my friends hadn't really yet. And so I remember that was when the comparison really started. And it's something that, I still struggle with to this day. And it just, looks different, and learned a lot of how to handle that. But as a middle schooler, you don't know how to handle that. And you don't really know what to do with the fact that your body is changing and might be happening faster than for other people.
Because it's certainly not equitable, is it?
Right.
Especially
And
at that
so,
age.
I just remember my friends being so small, and they were all dancers, and I was a swimmer, just a very different build. And so, but I vividly remember in 8th grade, I was with a few friends. We were getting ready for someone's birthday party, and my very insecure self turned to one of my friends, and I was just like, "You're so beautiful and so thin. You should model." And she was like, "They have plus size models too." And that was I truly think that is what started all of it, because I was already insecure. I already felt those things in my mind. But then to hear someone else say something like that, it confirmed to me oh, other people think this of me too. I am different. Even though I wasn't, I just had it in my mind that I was. And then someone had said something that kind of felt like it confirmed that.
Think about that verse, whether, I'm sure she wasn't trying to be hurtful, maybe she was, but that idea of a small spark sets a forest on fire.
Yeah.
The tongue speaks something. I can remember things that were said to me. I was 6 feet tall, which is where I'm at now in 7th grade, about 80 pounds lighter than I am now. And for those that are just, listening, I'm not heavy, But I'm 185. I was 125, 6 feet tall. I was a reed, a willow. I looked hilarious. And I had really big feet, size 12 in 7th grade. And those things were noticed by others who would say things. Of course, I acted cool, like it didn't bother me, but it did. And guys have some level of consumption about appearance and things, but nothing like women go through. I've got 3 daughters, I know it, and a wife. I know what that's like to hear them. I don't know that from my experience, but I know what it's like to hear them talk about that. So that phrase or that statement, you know, they have plus size models too. How often did you hear that in your head, or just the consequences of that filter through your mind?
I mean, I still kind of hear it. Like if there's a day where I'm feeling more insecure, there's part of me that goes right back to that little middle school girl. And I talked with my counselor a few years back about it, and we like went back to that moment together, and of just like, she asked me what I would want to say to 7th grade Rebecca, and I just like burst into tears because it was something that at the time 21-year-old Rebecca needed to hear as well. And so I definitely, those words really stuck with me, and I mean, I thought about them every single day, and I'm very glad that I don't anymore, but that was definitely, I mean, it sparked a 7-year eating disorder that I battled through for all of high school and into college. So definitely thought about it a lot.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that as much as you're willing to share. And I appreciate your vulnerability so much, because I know those listening have had the same experience, or probably know somebody that's had that experience who might not understand all the dynamics of what's going on. So you talk about an eating disorder. When do you now know, looking back, when did it start, and how did it start? What did it look like?
I mean, I think it started then in 8th or 7th grade, but it wasn't like recognized until my freshman year of high school. But the rest of middle school, I mean, I remember asking my mom if we could do like South Beach diet together, you know, whatever. I feel like that was kind of the diet at the time. And so I remember I started taking salads for lunch every day, and I quit buying my lunch at school. Like I used to buy one of those like blueberry muffins like every single day. And I quit doing that, and I brought a salad, and like it's just so like a middle schooler, you know, I was like 12, 13 and obsessed with like, I need to be eating salads. And that was when I got really into working out, and not for the sake of taking care of my body, but for the sake, like to punish it. And I was swimming and running, and those are great things. And I was working out with my dad. Like none of those things are bad, but the obsession with it was beginning then. And it just, I mean, it's like dominoes. Like it just took a little bit, and then it spiraled in high school. And that was when I and everyone else noticed it. But I think the habits began earlier than that. Like it was not an overnight thing for sure.
Yeah, so the signs were there. Probably nobody could recognize them, because it seemed like in some ways could even seem normal, like, oh, you're wanting to be healthy, eat healthy, exercise. When could you sense, like, this is more than that? This is something I'm obsessed by. Or were you able to? Or did somebody have to tell you?
So my freshman year of high school, my mom, grandmother, and I went to Paris for spring break, and we ate so many pastries, and they're like super like thick hot chocolate. And I mean, I had the time of my life eating my way through Paris. But I remember on the plane ride back, like my stomach kind of hurt because I, you know, had just eaten so much for a week. And I didn't have my like bread with the like airplane meal. And that like, I mean, I vividly remember that of like, that was when, like if I were to look back, the signs were there before it, but that was what like really started the like cascade and the spiral like immediately. And so, yeah, on the way back, like it just started out like, oh, I'm just gonna eat less bread and, you know, less sweets because my stomach hurts. And that's how it started. And then I lost a little bit of weight, and I was like, oh, I like that. And then it kept going and it wasn't enough. Like it was never enough. And it got to the point where, so that was spring break. By that summer, I had lost probably 30 pounds.
Wow.
And I was under 100 pounds at this point. And like I said, I was a swimmer. And so that I need a lot of food and energy for that.
Body,
yeah. And I just remember like getting out of the pool and like after practice and like feeling like I was going to pass out. And there were a few times where like I fell because I was so dizzy after practice.
So
and
weak.
yeah, and I didn't understand why my times were getting slower because I was like, there's less of me. Like I should be getting faster. But I had no idea that I was just, slowly starving myself. And not slowly, it very much was happening quickly. But that went on into sophomore year, and I was tiny. Truly, like in pictures, you can see like my shoulder bones are like popping out. I looked really lifeless, but I didn't see it as that. I still saw myself as the girl that could be a plus size model.
Yeah.
And that was really, the body dysmorphia was so bad. I'd look in like 3 different mirrors before I left the house because I felt like I couldn't believe any of them. And I just remember like obsessing over the scale. I'd weigh myself like multiple times a day, like after swim practice, especially because I, had just burned so much. And so I felt lighter then. And after I ate anything, and if it went up at all after a meal, I'd go upstairs to the workout room and do abs or something and try to like burn that off. And I ran a half marathon that year with my mom, but I don't remember finishing it because I was so malnourished that I hallucinated and passed out on the finish line. So I did finish, but like I don't remember it. Wow. And like, the race pictures, like there's always pictures of everyone that crosses. And literally like I have the picture, my mom is like carrying me across. And that day I remember I ate like a full piece of toast with peanut butter and like could not believe that I was having that much food. But my mom was like, you have to be eating more for us to go run this much. And she didn't realize how little what I had eaten was because I was like, I ate a lot, I promise. Like, I'm ready. I carb loaded. And really, it was just a piece of toast. Yeah. And so, but I didn't see any of this as a problem. Like, I convinced myself and my mom that I was just dehydrated. Like, I hadn't drank enough water. And, but yeah, slowly I was just becoming more and more lifeless. And when it all came to head was a group of my friends wrote my mom a letter and me. Wow. And they talked to my parents and told them that they were really worried about me. And they also wrote me a letter. And I remember feeling so like betrayed by them. And now I can look back and honestly it brings tears to my eyes that sophomores in high school were like that good of friends to me to care about me that much and to see that this was becoming a serious problem. And so my mom made me go see a nutritionist and we went and I remember, she looked at me and asked me what I wanted to be doing in the next 6 months. And like I told her and she was like, you're not gonna make it till then if you continue down this road. And that scared me to death, obviously, but I still didn't want it to change. And so I left really mad and that was then what began binging, because it all started to like try to prove to people like, see, I'm eating. Yeah. And then I lost control because I had restricted for so long. The pendulum has to swing the other way. And so it became like I could not control it at all and gained all the weight back plus more. And I felt like the just ugliest, most worthless person ever.
You're in your junior year now?
Yeah, at this point I was a junior, and none of my clothes fit. And I felt awful. Like, I felt physically sick. I felt so much shame. I felt ugly because I felt like I was finally like pretty when I was really skinny. And so to now not be that, to not have to have what was my worth taken from me like that, I felt absolutely worthless, and it led to being diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and really struggling to get up in the morning and to carry on with life because I didn't feel like I had any worth anymore. And so that was when I finally went back to the nutritionist, and on like my own, like my choice to go. And my mom and I went every single Wednesday for the next 2 years, and I invited her to my wedding. I mean, she changed my life. She really did. So, but yeah, that was kind of long way to answer. That was when I realized, and it was by my friends writing that letter and then seeing that I had lost control and realizing finally, like, I needed help. So when I thought I had control, there was no need for help. Had no control, but thought that if I could control my food intake, then I had control of my whole life.
Yeah.
And so it was when I realized that I actually had zero control that I was like, okay, I need help. So
thank you. That's powerful. Yeah. To think about your friends having the courage and conviction to do that. Let's go back there though. So you're seeing yourself, you said you looked at yourself each day with 3 mirrors and you weighed yourself constantly all day long, which I don't think is probably very uncommon. I would imagine many people watching this or listening to this do that same thing because they're at some point or at some level, how they appear physically to others is what's grown into what matters most.
Right.
And that's our world, right? Yeah. It's the air that we breathe that matters so much. So you found yourself at a place where you felt like you were pretty or prettier. How would you describe it? You felt like, okay, I'm kind of getting
I felt like I was getting noticed or like all of a sudden I was getting attention. And
which feels good.
Oh, it felt great. And so then to lose that, it's like, well, confirmed again, just like that 8th grade comment, like something that I thought in my mind, then someone else saying something confirmed it. And so losing the attention confirmed like, oh, my worth is only, like I'm only pretty, I'm only wanted when I am really skinny.
Yeah, which I think is powerful. It's always something I'm always trying to do when we're on these various podcasts is what's underneath everything? Like, what's the thing that's driving that, the addiction, the bad behavior, the bad thought process, whatever it is? Because there's something underneath there that our enemy, who's real, roams around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. He wants that to happen. And these little statements in our life, like the little girl when she said that to you about being a plus-size model, this is like a tower of deception that's beginning to be built by the enemy, where he's spewing these lies to you all the time. And we don't know it at first, right? And suddenly what you're really after is attention, people thinking you're pretty or wanting you, desiring you, all those different things, which are very, very normal for us to feel as humans. And then all of a sudden you kind of get it, then the lie of I got to keep it, and if I don't keep it, that's going to go away. So that's all going on in your heart and mind as a sophomore, freshman, sophomore, junior. So your friends write this letter. How many friends were a part of that?
It was 2 of them. So
2 friends write your mom and dad, and then you, separate letters. Okay. And did they deliver them at the same time? How did that happen?
Well, they talked to my parents, and then I was like slipped a letter at lunch, and one of them was just like, read it once you get home. And I was
did you wait?
Like, I did not want to. I was like, this is a thick letter. Like, I'm gonna read this now. And I had English class like next with that friend, with one of them. Okay. And I just remember like feeling like so mad at her and just like, glaring at the back of her head in class and just like, I don't have a problem. Like, what is wrong with you? Like that kind of like so betrayed. Like, how could you tell my mom? Because it was in the letter, like we've talked to your,
parents. Okay, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Courageous on their part.
Yeah.
And
it really
in the
was.
end, life-saving in some ways,
Truly,
right?
Yeah.
But I can only imagine, And I think that sometimes maybe one aspect of this would be if you have, a friend who's struggling with something like this, or if your children know somebody that is, you've got to help.
Yeah.
They're not willing to look for, and it's even worth the cost of the relationship to plant the seed to expose what's going on that's so unhealthy. But a lot of people are unwilling to do that.
Right.
It's just okay, we'll just ignore it, and maybe everybody ignores it, and then really bad things could really happen. So, how long did you stay mad? Like, was that relationship with those two girls broken for a long time or short time?
It was for a while. Like I had said, I slipped into a deep depression after gaining the weight, and I did not really hang out with any of my friends because they were all people that I compared myself to. And so I hated them. Like, I hated them for looking the way they did, for being pom and cheer girls, for writing the letter, for, just all the things. Like, I had convinced myself that they were the enemy. And so I resented all of them. And it wasn't until the summer going into senior year where we really started to like reconcile things, and where I was beginning to heal, and so those relationships mended. And I think the reality of like it's senior year and our lives are all about to change, and I had realized like I didn't want to waste my last year of high school the way I had the first, what felt like the first three. And so there was a lot of reconciliation, also realizing that I had needed help, and beginning healing was also a big contributor to,
So let's talk about your mom and dad in the midst of that. They get a letter from these girls. These girls talk to your mom and dad. Just your mom, or both?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I'd assume just my mom, and then my mom and dad talked.
Sure. So your parents get told, we think Rebecca's got an issue with eating. So you go see a nutritionist, okay? And you saw her once, and then you talked about how the binging started after that. How long until you either saw her again or began to see a counselor? Because I know there was some time period, it seems like.
Yeah, I think it was like a year later. And then like 6 months later, I was also seeing a counselor. Okay. So I had lots of appointments throughout the week. And my mom, I went to the counselor by myself, but my mom and I went to the nutritionist together.
Yeah. So your junior year obviously was a very, very rough year. So you're depressed, you're anxious. What was your relationship like with your mom and dad through that time?
Not good. We fought all the time. I mean, I never had really fought with them that much before. I just remember like I just could not even stand their presence. And I'd just go to my room and shut my door, and I wanted no one to bother me. And I just remember like in being so depressed, like my room was so messy. And now like I cannot stand to have a messy room, because when my room is messy, it kind of takes me back to that. Like it's synonymous to me. Yeah. And I know mess doesn't equate depression, but for me, like that was something that had happened. And I just remember feeling like my mom was so annoying and just like constantly nagging me about cleaning my room, doing my homework, like doing all the things that like I wasn't doing, and I just like wanted her and everyone to just leave me alone. Yeah. I slept a lot. But yeah, like I felt like she was trying to fix me. And I mean, we fought a lot because of that. And what we went through together is ultimately what led to her now being a counselor. So it really changed my whole family's life.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm a dad and a granddad now with a little bitty grandbaby. When parents are faced with a circumstance, a situation that's like this, and many other, there are all sorts of situations kids can get in, and you don't know what to do, it's terrifying. So you do the best you can, which often isn't very good because you don't know what to do. And sometimes parents don't reach out for help. They don't, because they're trying to keep it isolated. I'm not saying that's what your parents did. But the critical thing is, when you don't know what to do, you have to admit, I've come to the end of myself. We need help here. And it's not easy when somebody's in the condition that you were in. Tell me about, if you're obviously alone a lot in your room, you have a relationship with God because you've grown up in the church. Where was he in this? How did you feel about God? Did you feel close, like he had abandoned you, all of the above? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I honestly kind of hated God for a little bit. And
did you know that at the time?
I did finally admit it, yeah. I remember going, like, one night just, like, finally, like, breaking and, like, going to my dad and just, like, sobbing. And I had thrown up again, and it had been many months since I had done that. And I went to my dad, and I was just, like, sobbing. I was like, I just feel like I'm getting worse. And he was like, no, like, you're finally seeing it. Like, you're seeing your sin. You're seeing this thing that has been an idol. Like, you've got, like, it's so much better. Like, it was so bad. You were so blind, and, like, it is hard to see it. But that is where, like, change really happens, where Jesus has been with you this whole time. He meets you right here in this pit. And it, like, you have to be honest about it. And he was like, that's the beauty of sanctification, is like seeing our sin more and more. It's not sinning less and less, but seeing our need for a Savior more. And so then I remember I went on a drive that night, and I was just sobbing and, like, shaking and, like, yelling at God. And I came home and I told my dad, and I was like, Dad, I cussed God out tonight. And he was like, you're finally being honest. Like, I was not expecting that response. I mean, he's a pastor.
What did you expect him to say?
I don't really know.
But it wasn't that.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting him to be like, good, like, that you just wouldn't expect that. But he was like, good, because you're finally being honest. And he was like, God can handle your anger, so take it to him. Because I had felt like God had abandoned me, but really, like, I was just sprinting away from him. And that is where I feel like I really started healing and changing, is because I realized that he was, like, full force sprinting after me, and that I couldn't escape his grace and mercy and care and provision over my life, even though, like, I had just absolutely lost control and everything felt awful. And I was not okay. Like, I realized, like, I didn't feel, that was the first time I realized that I needed a Savior. Like, I grew up knowing all the right answers, but it was then where I finally realized, like, oh, I need a Savior, because I can't control. I thought that I had control, and when I thought that I had control, I could be my own Savior. But I needed Jesus, and that was when, like, it's like I fell in love with God and with Jesus and with the human of Jesus specifically, and his life on earth, and just really, like, coming to understand that, like, he was tempted in every way, yet was perfect for me. And that was something that my dad and I talked a lot about, was, and something that I still to this day picture, like, in moments where I'm struggling with my worth or with sin or with whatever it is, like, I picture Jesus on the cross, bloody and weak, and him saying, like, Rebecca, I ate perfectly for you. I never was consumed with what people thought of me for you because I know that one day you will struggle with that. So walk in my freedom. Like, and I think about that a lot. And that has been honestly transformative for me, and just realizing like Jesus came and he lived a perfect life. He was tempted in every way, which means he was tempted with food, and which we know he was in the wilderness, and yet he didn't give in because I do. And he was perfect in every way that I am not. And I am so glad that that is my Savior, not me, who wants so often to be. So
That's really powerful. I want to unpack something for a minute. The phrase you use, walk in freedom, you hear Christ from the cross, I died for you. The specific ways you were struggling with food. And to think about Christ also being tempted with, satisfying the desires that others have for who they think he should be, just countless times. You should be the ruler that would rule over Rome. You should be all these things. He never surrendered to it. But when did you receive that phrase, walk in my freedom? Was that something you just on your own in prayer time with the Lord? Was it a counselor? Was it your dad or your mom? Where did you first kind of hear that phrase? Because I'm imagining you hear that now all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So tell me about that, the journey with that phrase.
My dad says that a lot and grew up hearing it, but it didn't mean anything to me until I experienced what it felt like to be enslaved to myself and to what other people thought of me. And finally breaking free of that is what, when those words began to mean something to me, and something that I hear a lot still, and speak over myself a lot still. And throughout college, as I still kind of struggled with this off and on, and just having to continuously go back to walk in my freedom, because I was perfect for you. You don't have to be. It is finished. Walk under the banner of knowing that you're free. So
that's powerful. So today, let's go from high school.
Yeah.
You've had this experience. You're with a counselor now. You're seeing her weekly, and then the nutritionist weekly as well. You talked about having a lot of appointments, which is good, because that's what you needed. It's sometimes people think, well, it's a deliverance, therefore I don't need the input from counselors or nutritionists any longer. And those are all means that God uses to help us heal and get better. So anyway, you finish high school, you then go to University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. It's where you meet my daughter, Kara. So talk about kind of that journey and other ways in which the Lord continued to show you his power to set you free, to deliver you in freedom.
I continued to kind of struggle off and on with that, because so much healing had happened, and then I get to college and there's all new people to compare myself to, and there are all new guys to give me attention or to not, that I wanted. And so I really began to struggle again with all of that. And I feel like I relapsed pretty bad with it for about a year or so. And that was spurred on by some unrelated trauma, and that this was a product that came back out of just something else had confirmed that I was not worthy. And someone's actions towards me made me feel again that I didn't matter, and I was only wanted for how I looked. And just, it broke me again, and I felt worthless again. And I was in counseling, or I started counseling again when that happened, and I've been in counseling ever since, and as maintenance now. And
That's good though.
Yes, I don't ever want to not be in it. But I was involved in RUF, the campus ministry, and Mike Ford was my campus minister at the time, and he just spoke so much truth over me. And I would call him or in one-on-ones meeting with him, and I'd tell him like things that I had done or how I had thrown up again or, whatever it was. And he like made the Jesus on the cross even more personal. Like he added a time to it of like it, whatever time that previous day that I was like leaned over the toilet throwing up again because I wasn't worthy enough to get to eat something that I actually enjoyed. Like at 12:01 on November 5th, like Jesus died for that and like made it so specific. And again, like I never outgrew needing to hear that. And I am so glad that I have people and pastors and counselors and friends in my life that still say those things to me because we don't outgrow needing to hear the truths of that. And I remember feeling so defeated that I had like fallen back to this. And but it was honestly in that I had to learn to cling to Jesus. And I saw his saving power before is beautiful, but I still didn't necessarily want to like cling on for dear life. But seeing that I had fallen back because I thought that I was doing okay made me realize that I absolutely like had to cling to him. And that was transformative for me. And around that time, or I guess a few years later, my junior year, my family took a trip to Israel for Thanksgiving, and I stood in the Garden of Gethsemane at this tree that was 2,000 plus years old. It's the biggest tree I've ever seen in my entire life. And I, again, went back to picturing Jesus there. But this time picturing what Luke tells us of the night before, where he's sweating drops of blood because he knew the cost of going the next day. And asking like, Lord, if there be another way, like let this cup pass from me. But there wasn't. And I just remember I stood there and I wept, and it's bringing me to tears now.
Yeah, of course.
Every time I think about the garden, every time I see an olive branch, like it brings these emotions back up for me, and just remembering like going back to the garden, and remembering Jesus that sweat blood for me, and was scared and felt like God was abandoning him. And yet he did it anyways, so that I actually would never be abandoned by God, and so that I could walk in that freedom. And just knowing the song, What a Love, What a Cost, like in that hymn, like I can't sing that without crying, because I feel like I understand the cost so much more now, because I've seen the extent of my sin, and I've seen the extent of me just trying to like grapple for anything from this world, and not clinging to him. And yet he loved me so much that he was perfect for me, and there wasn't another way. And he willingly went to the cross, and my dad always says he ate my shame, and he did. Like he absolutely demolished it and took it, and then let me walk in the freedom. And that there's no more beautiful love or cost than that. And that is something that I hold to me very dearly, and that I now, working for RUF because of how it changed my life in college, something that I talk to my girls about all the time now, and just the personhood of Jesus, that he was perfect, and that then he died for us, but that it doesn't end there, but that he rose again, and so Satan doesn't have power. He doesn't get to win. An eating disorder doesn't get to have the final word. My worth from college, high school, middle school boys like don't get the ultimate say. And I now get to tell the girls that I get to spend time with through my job about that. And it has been through all of these things that has made me want to follow Jesus forever because he's so worthy of following forever because he didn't let me go. And he used these horrible things in my life for good. And now, like, I want to tell everyone about that. And I get to because of my job, which is really cool.
Yeah, so you mentioned RUF, that's Reformed University Fellowship, which is a campus ministry, part of the denomination that we're a part of, Presbyterian Church in America. So Garden of Gethsemane, I've been there. And that was so powerful because it's one of the places that they know for sure this is where that garden was. And I remember going, and my family was with me, and you just have a little bit of time. You don't get to stay there all day. Right. And it's noisy all around it. And I remember talking to our guide saying, I imagine it was much more tranquil. And like, oh, no, it wasn't tranquil. When Christ was here, all sorts of things were happening. And the noise from animals moving through and all that was taking place in terms of the high religious celebrations, just the sheep that would have been moving through and all these different things. It was really interesting. But when I stood there and then I laid down there, I realized that somewhere on this earth that Christ himself made and spoke by the word of his power, his blood poured out. Somewhere that I can see. Yeah. I'm not sure where at in this small space, but somewhere his blood poured out. And for those that aren't familiar with the story, the Gospel of Luke's where it's recorded, in Luke was a physician. And he tells this story and he quotes Jesus as saying, as he asked his friends, his disciples to pray for him, he says, "My soul is overwhelmed to the point of death." And that word overwhelmed is a powerful word, which you felt overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed. Anybody listening to us at times feel overwhelmed. But it means three things. It means to be buried underneath a huge mass. It means to be defeated soundly, or it means to receive too much of something. And when you think about Christ in the garden, he's being overwhelmed. He's about to be buried underneath the weight of all of his children's sin. He's about to receive the wrath of his Father, which we deserved. He's about to be defeated soundly, like on the cross. He dies. They pierce his side and out flows a mixture of blood and water, which means his heart had burst. But what I love is the story of the resurrection. 3 days later, he overwhelms death. Death receives too much of him. Death is buried underneath the weight of his resurrection power. Death is defeated soundly. This side of heaven, we're going to continue to feel what it means to be overwhelmed by things in this world. Rebecca, I love how you've talked about the sweet relationship that you have with Christ, but it came out of you yourself being bruised. It came out of a girl in junior high saying what she said to you, which was a deep, deep wound and a spark that set a forest on fire. And that looked like, at that moment, a great victory for Satan. And real evil did happen. What took place in your life and to your heart, mind, and body was real. But God and God alone can resurrect what was dead and dying as he continues to do that. And the way you speak to that so clearly and with such transparency is very, very powerful. The enemy that we have, we believe is real. He's not all-powerful. He's not all-knowing. He's not all-present. But our God is the God you cursed out. I love your honesty. He is, and he can handle that. You were overwhelmed. And it was at that place where something greater than your sin overwhelmed you, and that was the love of God, which is what you continue to tell people about today. That's very, very powerful. So what would you say to anybody listening that is where you were. And they might not be in junior high or high school. They might be, in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They may be much older, but still have made an idol out of what other people think about them, whether it's appearance or their parenting or their, career, whatever it might be. Yeah. What would you say to them? What would be the words of encouragement you would give?
There's a lot, but I feel like for me, I constantly go back to that image in the garden, and but everything before that of Jesus's perfect life, and that there is so much freedom to be found in the ability to fail, and because He is a perfect God who came because we are imperfect, and He didn't die to make us worthy. He died proving that we are of His love, and being able to walk in that freedom of knowing like it is okay for me to fail because I am loved by the maker of the universe who didn't just make me and everything and is impersonal, but like He came and lived so that He could identify with me, so that nothing that I experience He wouldn't have already, or nothing that I experience is new. Like I am not experiencing anything alone. And that to me is so beautiful. And that proves that He is worthy of following, and that I think that reveals how much freedom there is to be found, that it is hard. It is a dying to self to lay aside the things that I think are going to give me worth in this life, or the freedom of, or the feeling that I have to be perfect or look perfect, or for those listening, be the perfect parent or spouse or friend or whatever it is. Like He came and was perfect for us and experienced all of the pain that this earth has to offer, all the temptation, but tenfold, because He never gave in. And He did that for me. He did that for you. He did that for everyone listening. And because of that, that is how I know that He is worthy to trust, and that Him going to the cross and rising again, or rising and then promising to return again, I know it's all true, because who would come and live a hard life without a purpose of rescuing us all? And that is the hope that we have to cling to, is that He is coming again. And this time He's taking us all with Him. And the God that made us intimately and deeply knows us and cares. And it's proven in the fact that He came and lived and died and rose again and is coming back for us.
That's what we call the gospel.
Yeah.
We're recording this on December 20th of 2022. It's not going to air for many weeks, maybe even later in the spring. But it's timely in the sense of, you use the word come, or coming for us, which is Advent, and Christmas is just 5 days away. And obviously as a pastor, I'm giving lots of thought to what I'm going to say on Christmas Eve, which is Saturday, and then we'll be back here again on Sunday morning for worship, and it'll be Christmas Day. And I think about the hymn, Come Thou Long Expected Jesus, how it talks about how Jesus came to earth to taste our sadness, He whose glory knew no end. And I think for some people, they don't realize the suffering that Christ went through constantly, being tempted and never sinning. You talked about how you love to focus on the humanity of Christ, and I imagine that's why, is that He really did feel the temptations, in actually in more extreme ways than we do. Right. Hebrews 2 says, because He Himself suffered when He's tempted, He's able to help those who are being tempted. And He is. I know when people are at a really low point, what is so desperately needed is the presence of somebody that really loves them, and often good counsel. And the person of Christ is both of those in perfection. He really is present. He's omnipresent. He's more present than the disease. He's more present than the addiction. He's more present than the pain. He's more present than the thoughts, patterns, emotions, whatever. He really is. But he's also the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. That's what he's described as in Isaiah, in that prophecy. But how he reveals those things to us through his word and spirit, he also often reveals through his people, through a conversation like this, through the counseling that you give to students who are part of our UF ministry, to the degree that your mom's pursued as a counselor now and as she is building a practice here in Dallas, to the very words your dad as a pastor would proclaim. We proclaim these things to be true because of the powerful impact they've had on our life. In the way this side of heaven, we're still going to battle, aren't we?
Yes.
You know, the question I want to end with is, you had it out with God and cursed God, were angry with God. You go to college, you essentially called it a relapse, which we all as sinners relapse into all sorts of things. What was your relationship with God like then, having had that experience before?
It was hard.
Was it hard to be honest, or was it easier to be honest the second time?
It was easier, to be honest. It was, I mean, in some ways both. It was a lot easier to admit that I was really mad at him. It was harder to admit how much I was hurting and acknowledging my sin, because I wanted to have defeated it. But it was easy. I knew I could be honest with him. And that, like I was very openly mad at him. What I experienced in college was really, really hard, harder than high school. And so but having that freedom to just have it out with him was very healing. And I think some could say not good, but I think that there's a level of beauty to that, because God can handle it and he isn't scared of my real feelings and emotions and pain. Because I knew, because he had done it before, that he climbs into the pit with me. And so he met me there and could handle all of my anger and sadness and fear and everything. Like none of it was too big for him.
Yeah, and that's what I want people to really hear, is that the enemy never stops. He is in a constant position of firing shame, fear, anxiety, lies. That's how he devours us. What we counter that with is that tower of deception is built as a tower of truth, which is what you've done today. You've just layered this with constant truth against it, which you do yourself every day. So do I. We have to preach the gospel to ourselves. Yes. Sometimes stop listening to ourselves, preach the gospel to ourselves. The Psalms are the book of the Bible, not the only one, but the primary one that gives us the freedom to express every emotion that we have. And so often they're lamenting, complaining, because we don't need to call evil good or disease good or addiction good or whatever, abuse good. It's not good. But in the midst of that, what Satan wants is to keep us focused there. The Lord's saying, I can set you free from all of that, even the consequences of that. And it's going to be done in that union that we have with Jesus. So often, the way he does it is by bringing someone alongside where we feel his presence, hear his truth from a relationship that we have with another person who's able to give us that hope because they've experienced it. You've done that today. It's been a great blessing to hear just how honest you are about your story and the realization of the power of Christ to enable you to walk in freedom as the Holy Spirit lives in you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I love that you bring up the Psalms too, because I I read a psalm every single morning. Doesn't matter what else I'm studying at the time, I read a psalm. I go through it. Once I get to 150, start over again. That was a practice I started in college when I was learning to deal more honestly. So
a lot of people aren't aware of how honest the Psalms are, and there's just not an emotion that we can experience that is not recorded in there, including anger. Where are you? Why, God? All those kinds of things. It's interesting that Psalms, though, always end with a surrender, to who He is. That one Psalm in Psalm 119, it says, "The Lord is good and does good." What I think a lot of people misunderstand about Christianity is they think God promised to take away pain, and He didn't this side of heaven.
Right.
He promised to give us Himself until that day when all pain will be taken away. You mentioned it earlier, we'll be forever with Him when He returns or calls us home. And we won't experience a conversation like this in regards to the things that have happened to us, by us, through us, all those things. We will never say things that we say today like, I wish, or I hope, or we won't even know what it means not to walk in freedom. That will be a foreign concept. Isn't that amazing? Well, thank you for your time. May the Lord continue to bless you in your ministry, and as you and your husband move into the next season of life, whatever that is. I can't wait to just watch the way God uses you as He has already to help so many. Thank you.
So much.
Thanks for tuning in with us today. This has been a really beautiful conversation about brokenness and just the reality of what one little phrase could do to set a forest on fire, which seems like it would have the final say, but it doesn't. It's the Lord's power. It's His word that ultimately overwhelms us because we trust Him. If you're suffering from anything that's putting you in a place of despair where you feel like I am desperate for help, you're in a good place. Call 214-224-2500 or reach out to us at deeplight@pcpc.org. One of our pastors will respond to you quickly to come alongside you in any way we can. There are people, I promise, who have gone through and are going through what you're dealing with right now. And the one above all is Christ Himself, who really can offer you everything that you need in Him for life now and then life in eternity. God bless you. And Rebecca, thanks again. It's been a real treat. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Deep Light podcast from Park Cities Presbyterian Church. We would love for you to be our guest this Sunday morning as we gather together for worship at 8, 9:30, or 11 a.m. We are located in the Uptown Dallas area at the corner of Oaklawn Avenue and Wycliffe Avenue. To find out more, please visit pcpc.org.